The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers. All these
My name is James Hershey.
voices in the rain.
Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. But my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
I know how to
ghost
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello everyone and welcome to Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and I am joined as always by the one and only old boy, James Ash. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. How you guys doing, misfits, sugar ladies, and demon hunters?
Tonight's episode is going to be really interesting, at least to me. I learned a hell of a lot in doing the research for this episode. A lot of the things that we talk about, because I am in this field, I already know a whole lot about it. This is one where I thought I knew about it, but when I started doing research, I realized I didn't know anything about it really. And so I learned a whole lot, and I love learning things. So for me, this was a good one. Tonight's episode is going to be Slenderman. Now, Slenderman, I thought, came from creepypasta, and that it was some modern urban legend kind of thing that they made up. And I always thought, what a stupid creature, you know what I mean? Some big, tall, gangly, goofy-looking dude with no face. I mean, it's just silly, you know what I mean? It's silly. But old boy brought the idea up of doing the show on Slenderman, and I thought, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting, because, you know, he's popular, and it'd be interesting to learn a little bit about this thing. So I started doing some research on it, and I found out that this is not a modern creation at all. This thing actually is documented throughout history, and which really tripped me out. Back in the 16th century, there are German wood cuttings that date back to that time period that have the Slender Man on them. And at that time, the Slender Man was known as Der Grossman, which is translated to basically the Doll Man. And according to the legends, he was an evil fairy that lived in the Black Forest. And he preyed upon children that would wander into the Black Forest at night. And I actually found a journal entry dated 1702 that tells about a child that was stolen from his bed by the Grossman. It's really interesting to me because, like I said, I thought this was a modern creation, and then come to find out this thing is littered throughout mythos of all kinds of different cultures. I mean, for example, there's a Romanian fairy tale, right, that tells the story of these two girls that are twins, and they walk through the forest with their mom, and they happened into this clearing where they found the Slender Man. One of the sisters saw it and freaked out and just took off running and ran away, and the other one stayed there with their mother. And what the mother did was told the sister to stay there with her, and she like cut this circle in the ground around them, and they had to stay in a circle, and then she sprinkled some stuff, and the Slender Man actually took over the mother's mind and made her take out the daughter. And so basically what ends up happening at the end of this fairy tale is that the Slender Man shows up at the little girl's house because she ran home and she freaked out, and she went home and hid, and her dad came home, and she told her dad what had happened in the forest, And so, of course, he grabs an axe and he takes off out the door. He's going to the forest to get his family back, right? So he wanders out there after the Slender Man. So then the little girl's sitting there and she's waiting and she's waiting and she's waiting and nothing, nobody comes home. And she's really getting freaked out and worried at this point. And night falls and she hears something coming and she's kind of like freaking out and wondering what it is. And then they start banging on the door. And she said it's her father. And then she's like, oh my God. And then the voice changes and he says, no, it's your mother. No, it's your sister, right? And it was actually the Slender Man, and he popped in the door and took her. And so that's like a Romanian fairy tale. So this thing it runs the gamut of all kinds of different cultures and time periods, which is, to me, was really amazing.
Even in Egyptian lore, they have a picture of him on the wall. I was reading about it, and even in Egyptian time, in Egypt, and I think it's before Christ, they had him on the writings of the wall, and even in Greece. And I was looking about him. They have a nickname for him. It's hard to say. God, I'm going to probably kill it. Del Riddler. It's a German name. That's what they call him. Del Riddler. I don't know. It's hard to say, guys. I'm not good at saying words, but what I've read is originally what happened is he got on Creepypasta 2009. That's where it got real popular. Victor Surge, Eric Crudson, that's who started this. I guess he photoshopped pictures of the Slender Man, and that's why people hear the story of that, because they think it's a joke in 2009. And then the girls in 2014, Morgan Gipsy and Anissa, I think it's Windler. They tried to kill their friend.
It's Morgan Geyser and Anita Wire. That's the name of the two girls. And they brutally stabbed their friend to death. And when authorities found them and figured out what had happened and asked them, what was going on, they told authorities that they were forced to do it by Slenderman. And they claimed that if they didn't do what the Slenderman wanted them to do, then their families would have been killed, and that Slenderman would have killed them themselves. And the authorities, they investigated the little girl's rooms and everything, and they found drawings of the Slender Man, and they found like these weird mutilated Barbie dolls. That's the old boy coming back. His call dropped out. But they found these mutilated Barbie dolls in Morgan's room, and the psychiatrist claimed that she was just crazy. They said that she believed that Harry Potter was real and that she was living in a fantasy world with Harry Potter and dragons and all kinds of stuff. So the psychiatrist says she's absolutely nuts, but it was Morgan Geyser. She blamed it all on the Slender Man and said that Slender Man would kill her and her family.
It was Geyser or Gipsy. It was something like that. But they took her friend out in the forest and they tried to kill her and stabbed her 14 times, but she lived. But she said it. The Slender Man also threatened to kill her family. Also, what else? There's another story of I think it was another girl or a guy, I don't know if it was a girl, when she was 13, tried to kill her mom. And she ended up saying the same story, that Slender Man threatened to kill her family if he didn't do what she wanted him to do. And so basically this thing, and I've heard stories before about this, that this thing, once it sees you, it haunts you forever till it kills you. But there's so many stories on it, just like, sorry you guys, earlier I got cut off. I had to jump back on, but that's why you didn't hear me for a minute. But this is reading the story about this thing. Originally what I was saying is it was made up by some guy, but he got the lore from what you were saying earlier in Germany and stuff. And then he made it bigger, and then now it's got it was on HBO. There was a documentary, I think last week or so, about this, and now people actually have made this thing. There's people who say they see this thing, and it's supposedly either a demon or some people think it's an alien. It could be either from 6 to 7 feet tall to 15 feet tall with tentacles. It has no face, but it wears a suit. It's a really weird story. So.
Yeah, the suit thing comes from, if you look at the lore on this creature, in the olden times, in the Middle Ages, it dressed as a nobleman. And nowadays, it dresses in a suit. So I think what it is it emulates somebody of high stature, somebody who's rich, you know what I mean? Somebody who's well-to-do in the society, in order to to gain the trust and lure children and stuff. I think that's where the whole suit thing comes in, because at first I was like, what the hell is he? It's goofy. He's wearing a suit. Why would a monster be wearing a suit? It makes no sense. But in studying the lore, it talked about how it dressed as a nobleman all the time back in those days. So I think the suit that it wears nowadays is just the modern equivalent of the nobleman garb that it wore back in that time. And they don't know whether it's actually clothes or if it's its skin. If it's like a shapeshifter of some sort that can form its skin to look like that. Not sure.
Yeah.
That's where this thing gets creepy as hell, because like the Slender Man is not your average ordinary monster. Okay, there's a lot of really weird stuff that goes along with this dude. And that's where, like I said, it gets super creepy, because Slender Man doesn't just pop out somewhere in the dark and kill you. It, like Old Boy was saying, this thing, it appears all over the place, so that you constantly see it. And it takes place over days or weeks or months or sometimes even years. And it likes to just psychologically torture you and drive you absolutely insane. Sometimes it'll get you to do its bidding, such as the cases we talked about already, where the Slender Man had people kill other people for it. Sometimes it makes you do its bidding before it takes you. But then sometimes it just haunts you and just follows you around and drives you absolutely crazy with fear, until it gets to the point where it wants to take you. One theory on that I have is possibly that's what it feeds on, is your fear. So maybe by torturing you and scaring you like that, it's how it gets its nutrients. You know what I mean? Its nourishment. Or maybe it just gets off on it. I don't know. But there's a couple other very weird things about the Slender Man. It says that the Slender Man targets the people that learn too much about him. So as you learn more about the Slender Man, you open yourself up to becoming a target of the Slender Man. I don't really understand why that is, but it's kind of weird, because when you start looking at all these supposed victims, every single one of them were obsessed with learning about Slender Man. They learned everything they possibly could about this thing, and then it appeared and it took them. So that seems to be in the mix somehow. Another thing that I thought was really weird about it is, one way you can tell that he's around is that he interferes with electronic devices. So if you're riding in your car and your radio starts flickering on and off and making weird, pixelated sounds and stuff like that, Slender Man might be around. And that's kind of cool, because you find that on a lot of ghost hunting cases as well, to where when a ghost does an EVP or to manifest itself, it'll actually drain the batteries of your recording equipment and your cameras and stuff in order to harness that power so that it can manifest itself to do a knock or to do a voice or whatever. We might be having some of the same kind of things happening here with Slender Man, because one of the theories about Slender Man is that he's actually a being from another dimension, and that's why he's able to just appear out of nowhere, and then it seems like he almost like teleports himself around. And that could be because he's from another dimension and he just manifests in a certain space, and then he can, manifest in another space. Maybe that's why he interferes with electronic devices, because maybe he's drawing power from those electronic devices in order to manifest. A lot like a spirit does, because a lot of people say that ghosts exist on another plane or another dimension, and that there are certain points on Earth where the pain that separates the dimensions is thinner than other places. And in those spots, you're going to have hot spots of paranormal activity, where you have a lot of ghost sightings and a lot of ghost activity happening there. It could be the same thing with Slender Man. So those are just a couple really interesting things. But on the history of this thing, like the lore, I saw actual photos in doing my research that were from the early 1900s that had the Slender Man in them. At first, I thought Photoshop, right? That's what you always think nowadays when you see a photo of something. You think, okay, this is a Photoshop photo. But I looked at the date of the photos, and I actually did a little research into the date and into the location where the photo was supposedly taken. Okay? And what I found was, for every one of these photos that I found from the early 1900s, if you look at the time when the photo was taken, like the year and the general time frame, and you look at the area where that photo was taken, and you check the records for that time period in that area, in every single case you had reports of missing children in the area at that time. Now, it wasn't just one or two, it was multiple missing children reports at that exact same time period where the Slender Man supposedly was captured on film. So I thought that was really, really, really interesting.
you got to watch out though. Well, some of the pictures are real from the 1900s, but I know that one guy, Victor Surge, Eric, I think it's Kurtzen, made some of these Photoshop pictures because I read about it, but he got the story from something, and it is weird how you say that because they say the Slender Man takes children, especially disobedient children, and what the story was you were talking about in 1800, I also read it, that he would take them away till they admitted to their parents that they were bad. That was the German lore, but they say now it takes you away and it either eats them or it's kind of like the whole, I think they kind of got this, where they got Sinister from was kind of from the story, because Sinister is kind of like a demon that takes kids and makes them do awful things. And I mean, Slenderman also has other names like the Tall Man, the Watcher. There's all kinds of things it was saying, like you were saying those German names. It's hard to say those. I'm not even going to try it. I'll kill it. But this thing has different names, but the one thing it always does, it goes after kids. And think about it. We've had two things that happen now, and I know kids kind of get into things and they believe it. But there was actually another kid got caught trying to kill his parents, plotting it in 2015, and it all blamed Slenderman. And you're right, they had Barbies with arms cut off and blood on them. I saw the pictures, and like I said, I really want to see that documentary at HBO because it talks about all this. I haven't got to see it yet. If you guys can, check it out. But this creature, whatever it is, if you, I guess you glimpse at it, it'll torture you and torment you to get you. And there's more of a legend than the creepypasta. Creepypasta made it outrageous, there's a guy in the suit. But there's some truth to this thing because there's a picture. It was, I forget what it said. It was made of him. And if you look at it, they show like its arms and it looks like he's death. And he's just, to me, what I think he is, if he's real, is that he's some kind of demon from another dimension. Or one of these creatures we're not supposed to see, like Enoch saw, and he disappeared. He saw these creatures in Eden that were before the like the Nephilim and how we talk. That this thing is something that crosses both realms of the universe. The 3-dimensional creature, kind of like it jumps our realm and it takes what it wants, and it goes away after a while. Like I said, it can be the size of 15 feet to 7 feet or 6 feet. Some people say it changes size. It's a weird creature. So it's really a fascinating story, and I've always liked it, even though some of it's fake.
And it very well could be that that's one of those creatures from before time. I mean, because if you look in the Bible, like you were just talking about, it says that God created the heavens and the earth, and then God said, "Let there be light." Before that, there was a void. But the void was not empty. It was a void as far as there wasn't like earth or oceans or any of that. There was just darkness. But the darkness had creatures in it. And if you look at a lot of the old Gnostic Gospels and a lot of the writings from back in that time period that weren't included in the Bible, there's all kinds of stuff where they talk about some of the creatures such as Leviathan and stuff like that were in that void and that existed there. And it could very well be that this is one of those creatures that has been around ever since before creation and is just kind of immortal and just is doing its thing, and we just catch glimpses of every now and again. There's a lot of different legends of different creatures that kind of fit this bill. They're almost the same. My novel, Call the Wind Spirits, I based that novel on the legend of the wind spirits, which is a Native American legend. And what a wind spirit is, it's basically a creature that feeds off of the life force of children. It comes to children in the night while they're asleep, and it feeds on their life force, but it only takes a tiny bit at a time of that life force, and then it never feeds from the same child twice. So there's no real effect in your lifespan because you've been fed upon and you never really know. But what happens on occasion, it's rare, but what happens on occasion is one of these wind spirits doesn't stop. Instead of just taking a little and moving on, it gets greedy and it feeds, and it continues to feed. And when that happens, these creatures become earthbound. And that's that is what I based my novel Call the Wind Spirits on, is on a wind spirit that has become earthbound and fed, and now that's how it has to stay alive, is by feeding on the life force of children, and it just sucks them dry, you know what I mean? And so if you look at that, and you look at the correlation between that and the Slenderman, it seems feeds on the fear of children. So it's almost the same kind of deal as a wind spirit. So it makes me wonder if all of these are the same creature, or if they are very similar creatures, and if there's a lot of different things that human beings exude, such as fear, such as our life force, such as joy, happiness, love, all these emotions that we think of that you can feel, and that feel very real to us and very substantive, like they have substance. Maybe they actually do, and maybe there are creatures out there that can actually feed on these things, and that's what Slenderman does, is feed on the fear of children. And maybe, with the wind spirit, they feed on the life force of children. Maybe there are creatures out there that feed on our joy, that feed on our love, that feed on all kinds of things. Because if you just look at science, okay, let's step away from the paranormal for a second. Let's just look at pure raw science. If you know anything about science, you know that there are millions of creatures that live on you and inside of you your entire life. Your body is covered at all times by little creatures that eat your dead skin, and that your insides are filled with millions of little bacteria that are living creatures that feed on things inside of your body. And we all know about tapeworms that get inside you, and they feed on. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff like that lives in you, and that we have no idea about if it wasn't for advances in science, so that we can tell. 100 years ago, nobody knew any of this. It's just because now we have the technology to be able to see them. And I think that there's still a lot of things that we don't know about that feed on us in ways that we don't even understand yet. And I think that's one thing that Slenderman could possibly be, and the wind spirits as well. And I'm sure there's a lot of different creatures that we have no idea even exist that feed on us in different ways that we don't understand either. What do you think about that, old boy?
I totally agree with you. I mean, if you think, like you were talking about the Nephilim and this creature and the wind spirits, the Jinn, they talk about that in the Old Testament, not in the new one. The Jinn, fear of the Jinn, that they're supposedly they're not genies like people think. They're more like demons. That's where I think that all comes in with the Bible. But it says there was creatures in the Bible that existed, like you were saying, the Leviathan, the Behemoth, the giants, creatures like this. And I think they do feed off of people, because I think they feed off of different things like greed, fear, children, the innocence of children. Think about that. That's one of the main reasons I think it feeds off of children, because they showed in science, let's get away with it, like you were saying in science, I watched this, that people can take some of your energy and feed off it. There are certain people, they call them psychic vampires. People don't believe it. They can take your energy, and certain people can't. It's weird. They showed it on TV how they can do it. It's not like enough to kill you, but it's enough to make you not feel well or feel like somebody's draining you. But you're right. If you think about it, that's why this thing goes after, if it exists. Because like I said, it is there's still the myth part of it, the whole creepypasta thing. It makes it look bad. But these kids really went out and did this. In my personal opinion, maybe that girl was messed up, but for it to have a couple more than just one incident, something's there, because this thing, she got very much into this creature. Well, screw the Harry Potter thing. You know what? Kids do this. But it got to two girls. Another girl tried to do it to her mother, and a kid was plotting to do it. And there's even a documentary about this thing. Some people say we made it bigger than it was. But this creature, whatever it is, and I think, like you were saying, and you're talking about wind creatures or wendigos.
No. Wendigo starts off as a human, and it basically what a wendigo is a human that turns into a cannibal that eats human flesh, and it drives them mad, and they have an insatiable hunger for human flesh. That's what a wendigo is in the Native American mythologies. That's basically what should have happened, like to the Donner Party and people that are lost at sea that have to turn to cannibalism. That's the mythology for the wendigo. This is a wind spirit, is what it's called.
Oh, wind spirit. Yeah. Well, a wind spirit. Well, I believe that, like I said, you're saying it drained it off of certain things and it got stuck because it went too far. But you got to realize this thing was in Germany, and it has a story to it anyway, saying it used to punish children that were bad. You know, just like they said, Santa Claus isn't real, but he was, and it is true. He used to have a guy with a switch, and they would smack kids on their ass. I think it was in the 1800s. I don't know if it was London or Germany, I forget. But there really was a Santa Claus, not the way people portray it now, but there was a truth to that story. There's a truth to every story. It may be exaggerated, like you always say, but we have things that people don't realize that might be there. And I think some people need to not know these things are here. What do you think would happen if they found out Bigfoots and Slendermans and demons? Demons are already getting proved that there exist. So is ghosts. I mean, there's basically, you can make, I mean, I know some of these shows are full of crap, and they exaggerate some stuff, but there's just too many sightings about ghosts. I've seen ghosts, you've seen ghosts, and people, that I think that people say, oh, they don't exist, but I really think deep down inside they know it does. They're just scared because they don't want to know the truth. And some people would rather not know that. That's what I think a lot of people live their life, is they rather be dumb and know the truth. So that's why I like doing these shows, because we tell the truth about these things. And maybe we're not 100% accurate, not going to sit here and say we are, but no one talks about stuff like this. And I love the story of the Slender Man. I love the whole story about it. It's just a crazy creature. If it exists, I wouldn't want it to come after me, and I know you wouldn't either, James. What do you think?
It's one of those things, man, where it seems to me like it would be more of an annoyance than anything else. You know what I mean? I don't see how it would be all that terrifying.
Yes.
Unless you're a little kid, For a grown-ass man, it's like this big, gangly, idiotic-looking thing keeps showing up, and you kind of just piss you off. It would get annoying. But the thing that makes the Slender Man kind of scary in a way is that I go back to the lore. I go back to that legend of it taking over the mother's will and her mind and making her turn on her own daughter. Now, the love between a mother and a daughter is sacred. I mean, something powerful enough to cause a mother who just a minute ago was trying to protect her daughter, something powerful enough to cause that same mother to turn on her daughter, that means it's a total and complete control of your mind. So that aspect of it kind of makes it a little more frightening. The man in you, and especially like me, the redneck mountain guy in me says, I'll just kill it. It comes near me, I'll blow its head off and it'll be done. But if you don't have control of your own mind anymore, then you really can't do that. It could really turn the gun on you and make you shoot yourself if it wanted to. So, I mean, that's one thing. But I'm a huge believer in lore. Okay, and whenever you have one of these creatures, this is a great bit of advice for people that aren't involved in the field, who are trying to determine whether or not something is real. Okay, so you have a legend of something, and you want to say, okay, this creature, is this real or is this some made-up story? One thing I always do is I check the lore. Now, if you find one piece of lore from one culture in one time period that says it's true, and that's it, then you might be looking at a made-up creature. But I tend to believe that when you start getting multiple appearances of a creature in multiple cultures' lore throughout multiple time periods, that lends credibility to me to this creature. And that's not just something I'm saying and some idea that I'm making up off the top of my head. We can actually once again go to science and we can look at this. When you're talking about a creature such as the silverback gorilla, the silverback gorilla was a creature that was a mythical creature that only existed in the lore of different cultures. And science said it did not exist until they found them in the Congo. And how they found them was they went there and they talked to the villagers and they heard the lore, and the villagers told them where to look, and they went and looked and they found it. Okay? So right there is an example of a situation where you had a mythical creature that science said there's no way this thing exists, and then they followed the lore, and lo and behold, there it is, a living, breathing creature that now they can study. had they just said, well, that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
it's just mythology, we would still never know about it. There's all kinds of examples of where science is wrong, okay, on things. Like, for example, the coelacanth. The coelacanth is an ocean creature that science said went extinct millions of years ago. And that was until one washed up on the coast of Madagascar. Once that happened, they realized, hey, this thing's still alive. This isn't an extinct animal. It's a real creature. The giant squid is another great example. That was something that was just out of legends, that did not exist. And if you said it exists, you were an idiot. You were a crazy person. You were a buffoon. Until they captured it on camera, and then later on in a net. I mean, this happens over and over and over again.
Yes.
So always look at the lore. So when you're looking at the lore and you start seeing, like I said, multiple appearances of a creature in different lores from different cultures in different time periods, that's an almost guarantee that there's something to the story. Now, that being said, it is not a guarantee that the creature that you are thinking of exists in the way you are thinking of it. Okay, it may not be exactly what the legend says it is, in exactly the same form and have all the exact same powers and all that. It may, but it may not. But you're almost guaranteed that lore, that mythology is based on something. Okay, there was some creature that they were seeing and having experiences with that caused that lore to be created, that caused that story, that mythology, that legend to be created. Okay, so it's based on something. That's the argument we have all the time with people about dragons. Okay, dragons are another one of those creatures that people will call you crazy if you say might have existed. Now, we know for a fact that dinosaurs existed. Okay, and dinosaurs are basically the same thing as dragons.
Yes,
They're
they
gigantic reptiles and gigantic birds, okay? And a dragon, if you look at what a dragon is, it's kind of a mix of the two. So we know that things like that existed on Earth at some point in time. And we also know that there are multiple cultures around the world that have lore about dragons in different time periods. Cultures that would have had no way of knowing about each other at the time. At least not to our understanding now, but who knows? So that's another clue that tells you that's based on something.
They got video.
Now, does that mean that dragons flew around the Earth and shot fire and acid and ice and all this stuff and were magical and slept on piles of treasure? Probably not. Probably not. That's probably not true.
No.
But there probably was some kind of creature that resembled a dragon that these different cultures had run-ins with. And maybe this creature could shoot fire out of its mouth. There are creatures on Earth now that exist that create a lot of the same gases. I mean, human beings are one of them. So, I mean, these things, there are parallels to them that exist. So always check the lore. If you're ever trying to figure out if a creature exists or not, do your research and check the lore. If you start finding multiple appearances, then you're onto something. Then start reading eyewitness accounts. Try to find any kind of physical evidence that you can find of the thing, such as photographs, such as, if you're talking about an animal, you're talking footprints, hair samples, fossilized remains, bones, whatever you can find. So, I mean, that's my advice to anybody that is getting into a field like this who just says, hey, I wonder if this thing ever existed. You know what I mean? That's a great way to begin that journey on figuring it out.
Well, just to tell you something, I just saw on the other day on YouTube, there was a giant lizard that lived millions of years ago that was like 30 to 40 feet. It was a giant, like, it looked kind of like a dragon, but it didn't fly. But they said when it shot at you, if it hit you, it had this, like, those lizards that can spit venom in your face, and snakes can do it. Well, this thing would spit at you. It had this acid. It is like getting burned. So they had something like that anyway, and that was a real dinosaur. So just like you were saying, that thing exists. So I saw it. Next time I'll send it to you. But it actually spit stuff, and it would eat your flesh off. Because you get bit by, what do they call them, Komodo dragon. They have all this bacteria. You could probably die. You're basically dead. So, I mean, but it doesn't harm them at all. It's crazy. So I don't. And there's, like I said, there's snakes and the running lizards with those things that open up. They run at you. They could spit blood at you. So it could horny toads. I mean, they have a natural, mechanism, so that there could be truth on that, because snakes can hit you with venom, and that's true. I mean, that and so can insects and other things. There's stuff that trains themselves to kill you. So there's a possibility these things existed, like he's saying. The lore, there's always some truth to every story. Remember that. Maybe it's exaggerated or blown out of proportion, and like you said, it probably didn't shoot ice or something like that. That was probably exaggerated with over time. But there's a possibility it did eat rocks, because there is animal like horse and camels eat sand and rock and stuff for their stomachs, especially camels, so they could survive. It's weird. But there is animals who do that, and basically this thing could be a possibility. I mean, I'm not saying 100%. I wouldn't say that, because of the stories of creepypasta. I think some people, this just proves a point, though, that they're very gullible. So also people who do get into this because of what's happened with a couple kids, or you have kids, pay attention, because you don't want to have what happened with the teenagers trying to kill somebody because the Slender Man told them that. And that's a whole another issue. We don't have to get into that, but that's a thing that should tell you that some people, if you do like the Slender Man and like it, make it sure it's just a story, because don't take it to the extreme and start thinking he's talking to you. And if he is, go get help. But there is video recordings of this thing. And I mean, recordings of like a guy, I don't know if it's real or not. I was listening he was in jail, and he said his kid's missing. And all of a sudden you hear him and the two cops shooting at this thing, and then they disappear and you never see him again. It's on unknown tapes or something. But then there's another one where this thing was calling, saying there's a thing outside of her house, a little girl, and kept calling and talking, and all of a sudden the thing started talking back to him on the phone, telling him, I'm coming after your kids. And that's the scary part of it, is you really don't know if it's real or not. And like you said, it's not, the scary thing is it can make you do things you don't want to do. And that should tell you that's how crazy it would be that thing could control anybody. So a gun doesn't hurt it. The first instinct is to kill it. Like me, I would shoot it. It's not going to make a difference, because what it does, it portalizes itself back and forth. It's not something, if it exists, that you're going to kill with a gun.
And if you look
you may not even be able to kill it.
If you look at the mechanics of this thing, the way it works, okay, we talked earlier about how it seems to feed off of the fear of its victims, because it psychologically tortures you over time by appearing and scaring the hell out of you until it finally takes you out. So that lends to the idea that it actually feeds off of your fear. Okay, and then we also talked earlier about how there's a direct correlation between how much you know about the Slender Man and the Slender Man actually coming after you. So the more you learn about the Slender Man, the higher your chance of it actually choosing you as a victim. So that right there seems scary on surface, okay? But dig a little deeper into that and realize what that actually means. Okay, that is another mechanical thing there. That is another part that makes up the Slender Man, is if your awareness of the Slender Man and your knowledge of Slender Man causes you to be more of a target for Slender Man, then that would tell you that that is a way that it can track you. Okay, that is a way, somehow it is aware that you are learning about it. So there's something, I mean, if it's feeding on fear, then that means it can sense things that we cannot see that's coming from us. Okay, emotions and spiritual things that are coming from us that we have no way of seeing or quantifying. But somehow he can see and track these things. So that makes you wonder about the human brain. If you are learning about this thing and it makes you a target, that means that it's almost like a homing beacon. Just your awareness of the creature sets off some kind of signal to the creature to come to you. So that to me, on a purely scientific standpoint is quite amazing, because we really don't understand how the human brain works. There's been all kinds of studies into psychic abilities and ESP, and in varying degrees of success. And it's really a fascinating subject, because we don't really understand how the brain works. I think that there are a lot of things that the human brain can do that we have no idea about. I for one believe you can heal yourself of most things simply through concentration and belief, you know what I mean, and willing your body to be better. I've actually practiced that in my own life, and it does work. Yep. on minor things, and I think with practice it can work on bigger things as well. So there's a lot going on there with your brain that you don't understand, but somehow you learning about this thing sets off some kind of homing beacon for it to track you down and to choose you as a target. So then another question we kind of have to ask ourselves is, are we making targets of ourselves or our audience simply by doing this show? I mean, through spreading this knowledge of the Slenderman that we've learned, and now our audience actually listening to this show, whether they're listening, live on the radio here, or whether they're listening later on the YouTube video, are they becoming victims as well? Are they setting off that homing signal to the Slenderman to show up at their house tonight? If that happens, I apologize to you, dear listeners. I hope that I have not sicked some kind of crazy creature on you.
Yeah, please don't call us either. We don't want it coming after us. Trust me. Yeah. Sorry guys, if it comes after you, all I could tell you is, and here's the best thing I can tell you: calling the cops isn't going to work. Getting a gun isn't going to work. And because if that thing comes after you, like he's saying, if it, whatever it is, 7 feet, 15 feet, it has a bunch of tentacles, it has no face. And I'm sorry. I'm a pretty brave guy. I've seen some crazy stuff, especially with my past with being a Wiccan witch and paganism. If I saw that thing, I would freak out. I don't care how brave you are. That thing is that big. It's just menacing because it has no face, but it does. It's one of those things. It has no face, but it does. It's weird. It's hard to explain. It doesn't need a face to scare you. It's something that, it's crazy because it's still, like you were saying, we are making it more with doing the show, because look what happened with those kids in the forest, and creepypasta made it exist even more. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street, where they kept making him remember, and it's basically what we're doing. We're actually talking about a being who feeds off of this kind of stuff. And I didn't even think about that. That's pretty good that you said that, because basically, like I said, watch. You never know. If you hear something like a fuzzing sound, like your radio going off or something, you never know what's going to be falling. And like they say, that he doesn't kill you right away. He tortures and plays with your head. He chases you in his dreams. He follows you everywhere. There's no way of getting away. And once the Slenderman's after you, you're done. So, if this thing's real, my apologies, but we can't help you. I wish we could, I just realized, the radio show, that's one thing we need to do.
I just realized that, like, Slenderman is like a really bad ex-boyfriend. Like, you need a restraining order against this dude, because he, like, just follows you around and, like, just stalks you and just watches you when you do things. He's, like, really a creeper, ain't he?
Yeah. He's pretty creeper. He's one of those people who just, especially with you, James, because you write your books, you have these weirdos probably come around, asking you weird questions. One day they're going to show up and it's not going to be the Slender Man. Sometimes you're probably going to want it, wishing it was the Slender Man. It's some crazy with a book signing.
Yeah, I've had some real weird ones, but I've had some really cool ones too. I mean, that's the great thing about doing what I do for a living, bro. And I mean, this is 100% sincere from the heart. I meet some amazing people. I mean, there have been, some instances where people have shown up at my house and it's been kind of iffy and kind of weird, you know. But there's also been some instances where I've got to meet people at signings and stuff, and the things that they've told me have just been amazing. I mean, like there's this one that told me that one of the favorite things that they do at the house now is he loves my novels and his daughter loves my novels as well. And you know, that always blows me away as a sidebar when I hear that, because his daughter is a kid. You know what I mean? But believe it or not, there are a lot of kids that are really into my books, which is strange for me, because if you've ever read my novels, they are not child friendly. They are horrifically scary books. I mean, these are horror novels. I mean, they're not like, oh, look, it's Frankenstein kind of horror novels. This is like wet yourself horror novels. They are scary books. But there's a lot of kids that love them, which is awesome for me, I guess, but it's kind of strange too. But he says at his house, their favorite novel of mine is called The Wind Spirits, which ironically is one we were talking about in this episode when we were talking about the Wind Spirits, as you know, opposed to Slenderman and everything. But he said what they love to do is they love to sit around and have little contests at their house where they draw, you know, wind spirits, and they draw different characters from my novels, and then they have the mother of the family judge whose is the best, you know what I mean? And then they win like some little goofy prize that they've bought just for that contest or whatever. And I mean, it's kind of cool, man, to think that you know, something out of my twisted head has affected people's lives in that way. And I'm very honored and I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do, you know. So, you know, if any of my readers are listening to the show, then, you know, thank you guys so much for all your support and all your love. I mean, it means the world to me. And I am truly honored to do this for a living.
And thank you, too, for James Hershey for doing the shows with us, because you know what? It's been an honor that I actually, you guys don't get it, but I actually get to talk and do a show twice a week. And I talk to him on a personal level, to a famous international horror writer. And it's awesome. It's like every day it's Christmas. So it's an honor, James. I wanted you to know that.
I appreciate that, brother. That's very nice of you to say.
So other than that, if you guys do hear a noise tonight, other than James Hershey, it might be one of your fans. It might be something you might want to look at, because you never know what's going to be staring right back at you. Like we do stare in the abyss, because we are staring in the abyss when we do these shows. Every week we're doing something different. And this was a unique story, and it just got to me, and I wanted to do it because of that HBO special, and I've got to see that too. But this is something that a lot of people are very popular. Slenderman's very popular. One of the most popular urban legends today, as of today. So we're touching base on this one.
And I wanted to tell you, that HBO documentary you're talking about, it's actually available on YouTube now for free. You can watch it. I probably shouldn't be telling that to everybody, because it's probably like a pirated version that somebody put up, you know what I mean? And I might get somebody in trouble, but if you do want to check it out and you don't have HBO, you can find it on YouTube to watch. And I'm really glad that we did this episode, because I know a lot about a lot of different things. You know, but Slenderman was one of those things that I really didn't know much about. I knew about, you know, the creepypasta thing, and I thought it was some recent made-up garbage that the little teeny bopper kids are doing, and I didn't pay much mind to it, you know what I mean? But you brought it up, and I thought, yeah, that'd be a cool little idea for a show. Let me do a little research and see what I can find out about this goofy thing. And to find the amount of lore that is available on this creature, it really is a whole new thing that I never knew about. And so I've really benefited and been blessed by this show this week, because I got to learn about a whole new creature that I didn't even know existed. And I think that it might tie in, like I was saying earlier, to the Wind Spirits, which is very interesting for me because I based a whole novel off them. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely going to continue the research into this creature. And if I find anything else that's groundbreaking or amazing on it, I'll be sure to bring it to the show and tell everybody about it. But we have about 6 minutes left, so if you want to go ahead and do your shout outs and everything, bro, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our wonderful fans. I want to give a shout out to the people and the listeners, to STX Media, Sal Hernandez, and Dread Time Stories. You guys got to check it out. It's at Walmart, Amazon. Awesome guy. I'm going to try to get him on the show. We had him on before on the old Revolution Radio talk, but he's done the show before, and I would love to get him on. Last Call Clothing with Jason Westerberg. Check him out. If you go and see my show, he gives you a 10% discount on his shirts. LastCallClothing.com. She's giving her a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Wet Movie One. I'm going to have him on the show and soon. He's one of the hoarding videos on YouTube, has 40,000 followers. He talks about hoarding movies and collecting all kinds of DVDs. And then Danny Fasario and Cinestalker, he was on the show. He wants to do it in a couple weeks, so we're going to have him in. I want to give him a shout out. And to everyone else, Chris, our assistant, James Hershey, legendary James Hershey, and your buddy, Old Boy. I love doing this show, and every week I'm excited. But thank you, people.
First off, on Sal and Jacob, Sal Hernandez and Jacob Grimm from STX Media, we had them on the Revolution show, and they're awesome dudes, man. I'm really looking forward to having them back on. They're great guys, and they're one of those companies that is a small independent horror company that makes awesome movies. And if you're a horror movie fan, then you know that a lot of the best horror movies have come from the small independents. I mean, that's where Halloween came from. That's where the original Nightmare on Elm Street came from. Friday the 13th came from. All these epic, amazing series and franchises, they have come from small little companies just starting out. And STX Media is one of those companies that is going to be on that level. I mean, their films are really good, and they're really interesting, and the guys are awesome. So I'm looking forward to having them back on. I want to give a shout out to Valley Vapors in Woodstock, Virginia. They're a vape company that sells like vape juice and different rigs and stuff like that for vaping. They do a hell of a lot to help the troops, and everybody knows that I got a real soft spot in my heart for our vets. Thank you guys for your service, and thank you, Valley Vapors, for all that you do. So if you're in this area, man, down in Woodstock, Virginia, stop in and check them out. Give them a shout out. Look them up on Facebook. They're a great bunch of guys. And the last thing I'll say, because we only got like 2 minutes left, besides check out my novels if you haven't read them. You can find them. Amazon's the best place, but they're, Walmart, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, all that. James Hershey Jr. is the name. But to Corey Feldman, you got to come on the show, bro. You got to come on, because I know Old Boy's been flirting with the idea of having you on, but we would love to have you, and you will get nothing but the royal treatment here from us, because me personally, I'm a fan. I loved a lot of your movies. You know what I mean? I think you're a great dude. And so from me to you, bro, come on the show. You can talk about whatever the hell you want. It'll be your hour. And that's about all I have. And I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would say definitely check out the YouTube channel. Just look up James Hershey Jr. on YouTube, and you'll find all of our shows there. Thank you guys so much for your support. And until I see you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. Until next time, people. Bye-bye.